Hello and welcome to the Leading with Lean podcast. My name's Philip Holt, author of Leading with Lean, The Simplicity of Lean, and Leading Lean by Living Lean. And in this podcast, I narrate all three of my books, chapter by chapter, in which I share with you my over 30 years of experience as a lean leader across many companies globally. The Simplicity of Lean, Chapter 4, Problem Solving. What is a problem? While many of us can probably recognise problems, the problem with problems is that there are simply too many of them to solve, and therefore we not only need to be able to identify problems, but also categorise and prioritise them well. Later I will cover the 5W plus 1H of defining a problem statement, which is extremely important in terms of being able to ensure that each individual's understanding of a problem can be calibrated and aligned. Also the H, how much of a problem is it, is extremely important in terms of determining whether it is worthwhile expending scarce resources at this moment in time, vis-a-vis other problems that exist. This is an age-old issue, as many problems are prioritised because of an individual's preference or bias, usually someone senior, as opposed to hard data that shows which problem should be given priority. Of course, determining the criteria to make the decision is important, and will depend upon the type of organisation and its strategic imperatives. But safety issues will always take precedence, rating and immediate stop and fix action. Quality issues come a close second, and then prioritisations will be made across the opportunity corridor, rated along the two axes of impact and effort. The intention is that resources may be expended along the corridor with a small number of high energy, high impact projects, a few medium energy, medium impact projects, or what we sometimes call Kaizen events, and many low energy, low impact, everyday Kaizen, which are generated through the empowerment of our people, which you'll see more of in chapter 11, Kaizen Everyday. And what you'll see in the book is a graphic which shows a 2x2 matrix with relative impact on the x-axis and relative difficulty on the y-axis, running low to high from the left-hand side up to the right for relative impact, and from bottom to top for relative difficulty. And the bottom left quadrant is what we call the quick wins, low relative impact, but relative difficulty is low. Those are what we would normally do, small improvements, which we call Kaizen. In the central area, medium impact, medium difficulty, we'll run what we call Kaizen events. And then the top right-hand corner, the high impact but high difficulty, are the projects. And that top right hand quadrant is what we call the breakthrough quadrant. The bottom left hand quadrant is what we call the quick wins. And then the bottom right hand quadrant, where we say a high impact but low difficulty, is what we refer to as the unicorn quadrant, because it's highly unlikely you'll find an opportunity in that quadrant. And the top left is where the impact is relatively low but the difficulty is high. And that's what we call fool's gold, because it's something that we shouldn't actually be working on unless, as we've mentioned before, it is a safety issue that needs to be tackled because, as the name suggests, it's safety related. However, before we even get to this stage, we will still need to define what constitutes a problem, and there are three standard types. Firstly, the standard is not achieved. Secondly, the standard is achieved but with high variation. And thirdly, the current standard is achieved, but a new standard is required. Let's look at each of them separately. Number one, the standard is not achieved. In this scenario, the performance of the process is such that the target is never met. This is probably the most easily recognisable of problems, as most people can identify the difference between the target and actual performance. However, underlying this is an assumption that both targets are set and performance measured, and even further to this assumption is the supposition that the right metrics are being targeted and measured. If we cannot show this with data, then time needs to be invested in measuring and defining performance for the process before time is wasted solving a perceived problem. Nevertheless, once we've correctly defined a target and actual performance, consistent underachievement of the target condition meets type 1 categorization. And what you'll see in the book is a graphic of a bar chart showing time on the x-axis and performance on the y-axis, a target condition where the average performance is below that target condition. Pretty consistent performance from bar to bar, but the average overall is below the target condition. Number 2, the standard is achieved but with high variation. The second type of problem is where the target might, on average, be achieved but there is excessive variation. Whilst variation is inherent in all processes, a tolerance should have been set on the acceptable process design level, based upon customer requirements, and this maintains a Six Sigma level, or better, if possible. Where variation means that although, on average, the mean, the target condition is met but the variation is excessive, a problem still exists and must be dealt with, even when all of the data points are ostensibly on the correct side of the target. Variation is an insidious foe and the downfall of many processes, as it is typically much more difficult to measure and to capture as a problem than a simple non-attainment of the target. And what you'll see in the book is 2 graphical examples of similar axes, performance on the y-axis, time on the x-axis, similar bar charts, but in this case, what we're seeing is a high level of variation, and we're seeing that the average is actually meeting the target condition, but the variation is below and above the upper and lower control limits. Number 3, the current standard is achieved, but a new standard is required. The final category of problem is an interesting one, as it can require a change in thinking about what a problem is. A traditional way of thinking about growth or improvement is to think of it as an opportunity and come up with ideas of how to improve. This might be to increase sales with a certain customer or area, or it could be to increase productivity on a particular process. However, in lean thinking, we turn this around and instead treat it as a problem to be solved. Therefore, the improvement ambition becomes the new target, and the team go through the problem-solving process to understand what the root causes are of why performance isn't already at that level. This provides for a much more robust and data-driven approach to understanding the issues that need to be resolved in order to achieve the new target and to make it the new standard. This is essentially what Kaizen is all about, creating problems by moving the target condition and problem solving to achieve it, locking it in by creating an updated standard for the new performance level. This takes a change in thinking and can be quite challenging for some colleagues, particularly those for whom the term problem is seen as a negative, and where opportunity is used to try to create a more positive language. However, I unashamedly believe that we should embrace the term problem and proudly identify the problems that we have, but with the focus on blaming our processes, not our people, getting to the root cause of problems and sustainably solving them to drive performance up. And what you see in the book is a graphic again, time on the x-axis, performance on the y-axis. It's the bar chart shows that actually the average and the variation is perfectly where it should be against target, but we've now set a new target which is well above the current performance level, so we've created a type 3 problem. The power of asking why. The question why is used many times in problem solving and is the bread and butter question. Many people are aware of the 5 times why when getting to a root cause. However, we should use why one step earlier in properly defining the problem statement. When defining the problem statement, we will often use the 5W plus 1H approach, which is an approach to determine what is the problem, why is it a problem, where is it a problem, when is it a problem, who is it a problem for, how much of a problem is it. By answering these questions, we can establish the problem statement in a much more robust manner, ensuring that the root cause analysis is accurate and that the countermeasures are effective. Within these set of questions, why and how are essential in establishing whether the problem is substantive and worthy of investing resource into solving. Together, they can help to determine whether the problem should be solved by the current owner, delegated, escalated, or left for now. Once we have established the problem statement and are undertaking root cause analysis, why plays a major role in getting to the root cause, as opposed to stopping at the symptom or headline cause level. 5 times why is a method which demands that the question why is asked a sufficient number of times to establish the true root cause of a problem before countermeasuring, avoiding jumping to a conclusion on the cause of a problem. For example, 5W plus 1H problem statement. Machine X in the Dartford factory continuously breaks down due to gear failure after only 500 hours of operation versus a planned run life of 2,000 hours, causing customer service level to be below target, 89% versus 99%. Increased quality issues, greater than 6,000 parts per million versus less than 2,000 ppm, and higher maintenance costs, 120,000 euros versus 30,000 euros. Potential causes had been prioritised and it was determined via data that an overheating motor was the most likely cause of the frequent gear failure. Question: why does the motor overheat? Answer: because the oil is overheating. Question: why does the oil overheat? Because the oil cooling system overheats. Why does the oil cooling system overheat? Because the system is fouled by metal shavings. Why is the system fouled by metal shavings? Because the water inlet has no filter. At this stage, the root cause is deemed to have been reached and a countermeasure, placing a filter on the water inlet, is determined. While this might seem like a simple example, I've seen many problems like this solved in inverted commas without getting to root cause, where conclusions have been jumped to in terms of the cause of the issue. For example, in this case, it would be easy to conclude that the cooling system was faulty and a solution, in inverted commas, implemented of changing the cooling system. This would likely be at a much higher cost and with much less effect than getting to the root cause of the missing filter, which is a low-cost solution. One thing that is important to mention at this point is that the example above only used 4 times Y to get to the root cause. 5 times Y is based upon it empirically taking 5 Ys to get to root cause, but is not mandatory and can take either more or less time to reach the answer. The important thing is that the problem-solving team, or individual, are convinced that they have got to the root cause before stopping. The 8 steps of problem solving. Like most things that we do in life, problem solving is a process, and therefore benefits greatly from having a structured approach. As with any effective structured process, the Shewhart-Deming or PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, is essential to its success and is the basis of the 8 steps of problem solving. And in the book, what you'll see is a picture of a funnel with the 8 steps along the left-hand side, moving from step 1 through to step 8, from the top of the funnel down to the bottom of the funnel, and following the PDCA. Steps 1 through to 4 are in the plan, the P. Step 5 overarches the P and the D. Step 6 is in the D, the do stage. Step 7 is the check phase, and step 8 is in the act phase. So what you see is that essentially steps 1 through to 5 are in the plan phase, which shows the emphasis in lean thinking and practical problem solving, which is placed on the planning stage of getting the problem solving right. By now, it will probably not surprise you that in line with much of lean thinking, the plan part is the largest part of the 8 steps, consuming the first 5 steps. This is logical, as getting the problem correctly stated, broken down, targets set, and the root cause analysed is a time-consuming process. However, investing this time up front is ultimately much more effective and time efficient than the conventional method of shoot from the hip problem solving. And again, what you'll see in the book is another graphic, this time showing the time taken with traditional problem solving, where the plan phase is very small, very short. The do phase is quite long. The check phase, again, is very short, and the act phase is extremely long, as because we've not got to root cause, we've gone straight to a conclusion on what the answer is. We've not properly solved the root cause, and it takes us a lot longer to resolve. What you see for the lean thinking approach is that the plan phase is much longer, the do phase is much shorter, the check phase is a little longer because we spend some time on it, and then we have a much smaller act phase. The overall time consumed is much shorter. An ex-colleague of mine, Mark Sneeringer, cleverly described the traditional mindset of problem solving as, we never have time to do it right, but we always have time to do it over again. I have encountered this issue many times, even seeing quite senior leaders getting physically frustrated because of a lack of do, whilst the team work through the plan part of problem solving. This is a very human emotional reaction, the need to see activity, to act, to feel that something is being visibly done to resolve the problem. However, this need for action in a doing sense must be translated into a sense of urgency to thoroughly manage the planning phase, enabling an effective doing phase. This is not to say that we don't experiment in the lean thinking approach to problem solving, but what it does mean is that we have solid hypotheses or options that have been developed from a thorough understanding of the root causes before we experiment in the do phase. This reduces the time taken in that phase, as the experimentation is much more focused and therefore more likely to succeed. The 8 steps run as follows. Number 1, clarify the problem. As covered earlier in the chapter, the problem must be stated clearly, be fact-based and aligned amongst all stakeholders, and the best method for this is to use the 5 W's plus 1 H approach. What is the problem? Describe what is observable. Why is it a problem? Explain what the negative impact is. Where is it a problem? Identify where the problem is emanating from or is observable. When is it a problem? Provide details of when the problem occurs or is observable. Who is it a problem for? Who is affected? This could well be directly impacting the customer, but it's also likely to be impacting people within the organisation. How much of a problem is it? What data do we have to demonstrate the size of the problem? The H is extremely important, as we have far more problems than we can possibly solve, and therefore it is important that we confirm that the problem is actually large enough to prioritise above other problems that we might spend our precious resource on. Of course, it is a safety issue, then we will need to deal with it immediately, and there can be judgment calls in terms of the perceived seriousness versus the reality. However, fundamentally, we need to ensure that this problem is not a flavour of the month or a pet project and is actually worthy of the resource at this point. Number 2, break down the problem. Once we've determined the problem statement and decided that we ought to proceed with solving it, we need to determine whether we can solve this problem as a single issue or whether it makes sense to break it down into smaller, more manageable problems, which we can then either prioritise and tackle one by one or delegate to different teams. As an example, imagine that we have created the following problem statement. For the past 3 months, the customer has been receiving delivery volumes of the Acme phalange valve of between 86 to 92% of the quantity ordered, causing significant dissatisfaction and a risk of the loss of business within the next 3 months. In the breakdown of the problem phase, we will look to see if there are some first-level causes of this problem, which we ought to treat as sub-problems for solving. In the case of this problem, we find that it's not as simple as the production rate, but there are 3 main issues. Quality levels are at 97%. Performance rate of the production line is below 89%, and capacity of the production line, even if greater than 85% OEE was reached, is 7% too low. The team might therefore decide to set up 3 separate but interdependent teams to tackle these 3 sub-problems. Set a target is our 3rd step. Once we have the baseline of the problem, we must determine what the target is that we're aiming for. Sometimes that will be determined by necessity, such as the example above, where the customer has a need that we must meet, and the target is clear. We must hit 100% of the quantity ordered with a high quality level within the next 3 months. In other circumstances, it could be that we have desired targets, which are much more about improvement than a short-term absolute business requirement, whereby we know that we must keep improving to stay ahead of the competition and to prosper in the long term, but we don't have an immediately obvious target to hit. In these cases, my advice is to set stretch targets for the team. Remember that we're at this stage in the problem-solving process because we deem that the problem was big enough to warrant our efforts, so let's stretch the team to innovate in the problem-solving. In terms of setting the target, it's important to ensure that we set a clearly measurable target that is a true performance outcome. What we shouldn't do is confuse the target with what we will do, the achievement of actions. Number 4 step, analyse the root cause. In this step, we must ensure that we do a thorough job of understanding the root cause of our problem. Many people stop at the first or second level of cause and put in place countermeasures that might give some immediate relief but don't solve the underlying root cause. Earlier in this chapter, I gave the example of the machine which was overheating, and how stopping too soon in the root cause analysis could have resulted in an expensive, short-term solution. It's imperative that the problem be analysed to get to root cause, with the most effective approach being 1. Go to the Gemba and identify all potential causes. Those are assumptions. Number 2, categorise and display root causes or possible root causes, so prioritise. Number 3, gather data to determine the root cause, analyse the data. A powerful tool for going through this process is the Ishikawa or fishbone diagram, which stimulates the team's thinking around the possible causes in a visual manner. The team used the listed categories to group the possible causes: people, method, measurement, technology, environment, and materials. Once populated, the team can then prioritise the most likely culprits before moving into the 5 times why analysis to get them to root cause. And in the book, you'll see an example of an Ishikawa diagram with the people, method, measurement, technology, environment, and materials categories leading into the problem statement. As shown earlier, when getting to root cause, the 5 times why method is extremely effective at establishing true root cause. An oft-used example is that of the Jefferson Memorial and its maintenance problem. The problem statement: the Jefferson Memorial in Washington is deteriorating at a faster rate than most other similar monuments, resulting in a recent safety issue, May 1990, whereby a 50-pound block of marble fell from the volute on the top of a column in the Jefferson Memorial. Possible causes: bird droppings, harsh cleaning chemicals used to clean the droppings, excessive cleaning, volume of water used for cleaning. Likely cause and 5 times why. Why number 1. Why is the monument deteriorating? Harsh chemicals are frequently used to wash the monument. Why number 2. Why are harsh chemicals needed? To clean off the large number of bird droppings on the monument. Why number 3. Why are there many bird droppings on the monument? Because of the large number of spiders on the monument, which are a food source to the birds. Why number 4. Why are there many spiders on the monument? Because they are attracted by the large swarms of insects drawn to the monument at dusk, on which they feed. Why number 5. Why are there large swarms of insects drawn to the monument at dusk? Because the lighting on the monument at dusk attracts the insects. Countermeasure: switch on the spotlights just after dusk. This example demonstrates how insufficient rigour in problem solving could result in countermeasures that don't solve the problem effectively, such as reducing the amount of chemicals responding to why number 1, resulting in a reduction in the cleanliness of the monument, or at why number 4, resulting in the possible countermeasure of installing insect repellent equipment. Note: in the interest of full disclosure, whilst researching my book, I came across an interesting insight to the Jefferson Memorial story on thekizone.com by Joel A. Gross, which provides a little more insight into the reality of the problem solving and some of the management decisions made. Step 5. Develop countermeasures. Once we understand the root causes, we can determine and develop countermeasures. Both short-term and long-term countermeasures should be considered, as sometimes the urgency of solving the problem will mean that the measures are required that, whilst not desirable in the long term, are necessary to alleviate the immediate need. In the example earlier, where delivery quantities were not being met, additional shifts or overtime might be put in place in the short term to meet the customer need and secure the business, whilst long-term countermeasures were worked on. The countermeasures must be created with an actionable plan, with an owner, a clear description of what must be done, and timings. Consensus around the countermeasures should be achieved and adequate resources made available. However, once the decision has been made by the team, action must be swift with a high sense of urgency. Number 6. See countermeasures through. It is a truism that results are only achieved with hard work and sweat, and problem solving is no exception. Too often the celebrations start when the countermeasures have been determined, when at that stage nothing has really been achieved. Countermeasures must be rapidly implemented one by one, learning achieved, strong discipline integrated into the team's way of working, and communication at the highest level. The PDCA wheel is rapidly turning at this point, and this is the stage in which the hard work done in planning the countermeasures will either come to fruition or be wasted. Step 7. Evaluate both results and process. The implementation of the countermeasures is not the end of our work, as we have set targets and must ensure that the countermeasures have delivered what we intended them to deliver. We need to check both the results and the process. Results: did we reach the target condition? Process: was the countermeasure effective or did we get lucky? Was our hypothesis correct? What worked well? What didn't? Where did we deviate from the plan? Learning: what did we learn from this? What to do better next time? Can we do it quicker next time? Step 8, the final step. Standardise success, adapt, or restart if unsuccessful. If we have been successful, we must lock in the success by defining the new standard, underpinning the success by making our new way of working that will be deployed and trained to all users. We must also ensure that we share our learning across the organisation, looking for other similar problems that could benefit from this solution. This is particularly important in multi-site organisations where we must maintain the integrity of global standardisation and avoid that we get divergence of methods across locations. With the exception of processes that have particular local requirements for regulatory, legal or customary reasons, there ought to be only one current best way of doing the work, the standard, until problem solving creates the next iteration. If we have been unsuccessful, either fully or partially, we must ensure that we understand why, use that learning and restart the PDCA cycle. It's highly unlikely that, if we followed this structured approach with rigour and discipline, we will experience abject failure. But some level of missing the target is possible. Where we set ourselves a stretch target and missed it, we will need to re-evaluate the problem statement and consider whether the "how much of a problem is it" question justifies our continued work, or whether we've done enough. What you'll see in the book now is an illustration of the PDCA cycle going up an incline with the standard underpinning or holding it in place. Kaizen then showing the next iteration to a higher level of PDCA cycle, higher up on the performance scale, with again a standard wedging or underpinning it. Of course, throughout all these steps, going to the Gemba is critical to success. Problem solving will need some time to be spent in an area, such as an Obeya room, that allows the team to collaborate and think. But this ought to be as close to the Gemba as possible and not be somewhere that the team hides away. We certainly don't want the team to disappear and the rest of the staff waiting, metaphorically speaking, for the white smoke coming from the chimney to signify that the problem has been solved. A3 problem solving. As we run through the problem solving process, it can be very useful to have a vehicle, in inverted commas, to collate and communicate with. The A3 problem solving document can be a great tool for this, and one that I would recommend that you use. The beauty of the document is that it naturally guides you through the process, beginning with the problem definition, target setting, root cause analysis, countermeasure development, checking of results, and standardization. The document gets its name from the fact that, pre-email, the largest document that could easily be sent across distance was an A3 size piece of paper, roughly equivalent to the American 11-inch by 17-inch tabloid-sized paper. The largest document that a fax machine could send. A3s are used in Toyota to communicate problem solving, status and proposals, with the idea being that lengthy documents should not be required to build consensus and agreement if clarity of thinking is in place. It doesn't mean that background documents are not available and technical analyses, Ishikawa documents, reports, etc. will exist behind the A3, but the A3 itself is a focal point of discussion amongst the team. Andon. To facilitate problem solving, an important concept is that of andon, the Japanese term for a traditional type of lamp. On a shop floor, either in a physical, for example a manufacturing line, or a virtual, for example a service centre setting, escalating problems will most likely be via an andon call by the operative to the direct supervisor. This can be by pulling a cord or pressing a button that illuminates a light to call their supervisor, or in more intimate settings might simply be by going to speak to them. Whilst andon can be an important part of visual management, the most important thing is not the mechanism itself, but the mindset of making problems visible as early as possible, creating an environment where people feel safe to do so and do not hide issues. Problem solving is best done early, as the treatment is normally much less costly, takes less time, and is far less disruptive if it's done before it accumulates more issues. This is especially relevant in an office environment where problems can more easily be hidden and can surprise the team at the least opportune moments. The lean leader must therefore see the problem-solving process as relying heavily on the team's willingness to make problems visible, which takes us back to Chapter 2 and the importance of daily management. Problem-solving is an interesting subject, as most of us solve problems every day. Hopefully this chapter has demonstrated that taking a structural approach to problem-solving is important to ensure that we deliver sustainable countermeasures and don't repeat the same problems again and again. The final thing to say about problem solving in this chapter is that the outcome must always be a Kaizen. I have many debates with people about this who argue that not every problem solving activity may result in a Kaizen, and that not all Kaizen are the result of problem solving. I will cover this in more detail in chapter 11, but I admit I find it extremely worrying when people put forward either of those arguments as an indicator that they have not yet understood Kaizen sufficiently. Perhaps this is something to spend some hindsight time on prior to reaching chapter 11. And the last quote in this chapter in the book is 94% of problems in business are systems driven and only 6% are people driven. W. Edwards Deming.